Most footballers think they're tired because they're not fit enough. That's the lie. And it's costing them matches. Because some players can run less, touch the ball more, arrive in better positions, and still dominate the game. Meanwhile, other players are constantly sprinting, constantly chasing, constantly working. Yet they finish matches exhausted and frustrated. Same pitch, same game, completely different experience. If football feels harder than it should, if every match feels like survival mode, if you're always one step late even though you're giving everything, the problem might not be your fitness. The problem might be how you're playing. And once you understand this, football starts feeling completely different. Because the players who look effortless aren't usually working less. They're wasting less. Let's talk about why you're running more than everyone else. Here's what most players get wrong. When they feel tired during matches, they immediately think, I need better stamina. So they run more conditioning, more fitness work, more suffering. And fitness absolutely matters. But fitness is often solving the wrong problem. Imagine two players. Player A runs 11 kilometers in a match. Player B runs 8 kilometers. Most people assume player A worked harder. But what if 3 of those extra kilometers came from fixing mistakes, recovering bad positioning, chasing after losing the ball unnecessarily, closing spaces that shouldn't have opened, making emergency runs instead of intelligent movements? Suddenly those extra kilometers aren't an advantage. They're a symptom. Elite football isn't just about movement. It's about efficient movement. And that's where most players lose enormous amounts of energy. Not physically, mentally, and tactically. The hidden reason football feels exhausting is simple. You're reacting too much. Football becomes exhausting when you're constantly reacting to situations instead of anticipating them. Think about what happens when you don't scan. You receive the ball. Then you look. Then you think. Then you decide. Everything is late. Now pressure arrives. You rush. You lose possession. Now you sprint to recover. One mistake creates 3 extra runs. Not because you're slow, because you were late. Now multiply that over 90 minutes. That's why some players look calm while others look exhausted. The calm player isn't necessarily fitter. He's earlier information, earlier positioning, earlier decisions. And football rewards players who arrive early, because every second you gain saves energy later. The game becomes easier before it becomes faster. And that's the first lesson. Lesson 1. Stop chasing the game. Start arriving before it happens. Watch average players during matches. Their movement usually begins after the event. Opponent starts running. Then they react. Pass gets played. Then they move. Space opens. Then they notice. They're permanently behind the action. Now watch intelligent players. They're moving before the problem exists. They adjust their position while the ball is traveling. They scan before receiving. They shift into space before it becomes obvious. They're constantly preparing. And preparation is one of the biggest energy-saving tools in football. Imagine a defensive midfielder. If he recognizes danger 5 seconds early, he takes 3 small adjustment steps. If he recognizes danger late, he needs a 20-meter sprint. Same situation. Completely different energy cost. Football punishes late awareness. Football rewards early awareness. The best way to run less isn't running slower. It's seeing faster. Lesson 2. Bad positioning creates endless running. This is probably the most overlooked reason players get exhausted. Most players think positioning is about tactics. It's actually about energy management. Every poor position creates future work. Let's say you're a winger. The ball is on the opposite side. You switch off. You stand too high. Now possession changes. Your fullback is exposed. You have to sprint 40 meters back. Exhausting. But what if you had adjusted earlier? What if you stayed connected to the game? Now instead of a desperate recovery sprint, it's a simple adjustment. Football constantly gives players 2 options. Move intelligently now, or run desperately later. Most players choose the second option without realizing it. That's why elite players often look economical. Their positioning eliminates unnecessary work before it appears. They don't spend the match solving problems. They spend the match preventing them. And prevention requires far less energy than recovery. Lesson 3. the ball should do more work than you do. Think about this. The ball moves faster than any player on the pitch. Yet many footballers try to solve every situation with running. They carry the ball too long, force difficult dribbles, take unnecessary touches, complicate simple situations, and every unnecessary action increases physical and mental fatigue. Smart players understand leverage. One quick pass can replace a sprint. One well-timed movement can replace 3 recovery runs. One simple decision can eliminate an entire defensive transition. Football intelligence is often energy efficiency disguised as decision-making. Look at players who always seem fresh late in games. They rarely waste actions. Their touches have purpose. Their movements have purpose. Their decisions have purpose. They're constantly asking, what is the simplest effective solution? Not, what is the most impressive thing I can do? The more complicated your football becomes, the more exhausting it becomes. The simpler it becomes, the more energy you keep. And that energy matters when the decisive moments arrive. Lesson 4. Mental fatigue becomes physical fatigue. This is where many players completely miss the point. Football isn't exhausting only because of running. It's exhausting because of thinking poorly. Every time you're uncertain, your brain is working overtime. Should I press? Should I stay? Should I pass? Should I dribble? Should I track? Should I cover? When players lack clarity, they burn enormous mental energy, and eventually that becomes physical exhaustion. That's why matches can feel exhausting even when your running volume isn't extreme. Your brain has been solving emergencies all game. Constant uncertainty creates constant stress. Constant stress creates fatigue. The solution isn't becoming robotic. The solution is building better football habits. Scanning regularly, understanding your role, recognizing patterns, knowing your next action before receiving. The more familiar situations become, the less energy your brain spends processing them, and the fresher you remain throughout the match. Football IQ isn't just about making smarter decisions. It's about reducing decision fatigue. Now here's where this becomes practical, because understanding the problem is useless if nothing changes on match day. So let's talk about what you should actually do. First, increase your scanning. Not because coaches tell you to, because scanning saves energy. Every look over your shoulder is information. Information prevents surprises, and surprises create emergency runs. Try this challenge. In your next match, don't focus on touching the ball more. Focus on scanning more. Notice how many situations become easier before you even receive possession. Second, ask yourself one question repeatedly. What happens if we lose the ball right now? This instantly improves positioning. You'll stop drifting into lazy positions. You'll stay connected to the game. You'll anticipate transitions earlier, and you'll eliminate many recovery sprints before they happen. Third, stop admiring your pass. This sounds simple, but it's huge. Many players switch off immediately after releasing the ball. They become spectators. Then the game changes and they're out of position. Train yourself to think, pass, move, adjust, prepare. Every action should lead into the next action. Football never pauses, so neither should your awareness. Fourth, study players who look effortless, not the flashy players, the efficient players. Watch how little they panic. Watch how rarely they sprint unnecessarily. Watch how early they move. Watch how often they scan. The lesson isn't that they're lazy. The lesson is that they're organized. And organization saves energy. Here's the truth most players never hear. Being exhausted isn't always proof that you worked hard. Sometimes it's proof that you worked inefficiently. That's a difficult idea to accept because football culture celebrates effort. And effort matters. But intelligent effort matters more. Imagine 2 players. One spends the entire match putting out fires. The other prevents fires from starting. Who finishes fresher? Who performs better late in the game? Who makes the decisive play in the 85th minute? Usually the second player. Not because he's naturally gifted. Not because he's lucky. Because he protected his energy all game. Football rewards players who manage resources. And your energy is one of your most valuable resources. The goal isn't to avoid running. Football requires running. The goal is to make sure every run has value. Every sprint should have a purpose. Every movement should solve a problem. Every action should move the game forward. Because the highest level players aren't trying to win the running competition. They're trying to win the football competition. And those are very different things. So if football feels exhausting right now, don't immediately assume you need more fitness. Maybe you need better awareness. Maybe you need better positioning. Maybe you need better anticipation. Maybe you need fewer emergencies. The smartest players aren't always the fastest. They aren't always the strongest. And they aren't always the fittest. They are often the players who make the game easier for themselves. That's the real secret. Football becomes exhausting when you're constantly catching up. Football becomes enjoyable when you're consistently arriving early. Start seeing the game earlier. Start positioning yourself better. Start eliminating unnecessary work. And you'll discover something surprising. You won't just feel less tired. You'll become a far better footballer. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and let me know in the comments. What's the biggest thing that drains your energy during matches? Because sometimes the fastest improvement doesn't come from working harder. It comes from stopping the things that make the game harder than it needs to be.